Hey Rick, how are you doing? Can you hear me? Hey Ashley.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, good.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey. Everyone have a good 2 weeks of writing?
It's just a blur. I have no idea what I did.
Yeah.
I woke up and all of a sudden it was 2 weeks later. How about you guys?
Yeah, same.
Yeah, goes fast.
hmm
I like the cat taking a nap behind you.
I love the
She
cat.
is stationed
Good
there.
morning,
Yeah.
ladies.
How are you?
Rick.
I don't have any audio.
We can hear you. It's cutting in and out a little bit.
Stop video. If you can hear me, raise your hand. Uh-oh.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Good, how are
Hey.
you? Hey.
Hello, hello, hello. So it is just going to be the five of us today. I spoke to Tamara a little bit earlier, and she is feeling under the weather.
Oh no.
So I'm just going to catch up with her next week. So yeah, anybody have any time restrictions that they're worried about that they need to be out by?
It's just 8 o'clock, but we finished early last time. So
Yeah, we should be okay. Alrighty, so I am just gonna very honestly just run through my list, and I'm gonna start with Ashley, if that's all right.
Okay. Hey.
Hey, hey. First off, I'm just gonna not even mess around. We're gonna dive right into the notes. Love the opening.
Yay.
Phrasing it, putting it into perspective with the Puerto Rican protest at the Statue of Liberty, awesome. Completely and totally sets the scene, and I love how you sort of have that continuing discussion going on throughout the pilot. I think it really, really helps to frame it, and also one of the things that it does is it that I didn't realize it when I read it the first time. It actually puts it in that period setting, even though
Mm.
90s, but that setting really locks in.
Oh, nice.
Like, great. Okay, I know this is a period piece now. So that's really, really good. I had a question for you in terms of when Lydia's getting like when she like goes into the basement and like there's the drip of blood under her hands and that kind of stuff. Is that deliberate, like Lady Macbeth kind of analogy, or yeah?
Yeah, kind of. I'm sort of flirting with some Santeria vibes that I'm going to be introducing a lot later in the series. But there, every time there's a sort of, she's having this sort of like trauma experience where she's like, she sees this blood and she can't tell if it's sort of like a vision of the future or something that's kind of like reminding her of something she's already experienced. And so
Okay.
that's why they kind of pop up every now and then throughout the script. I've been playing with how I really want to do it because I have to really figure out what the actual like rules of that magic are really, but it's sort of this like this haunting, like there's definitely something haunting her, and so it's manifesting in those visions of blood.
Okay, I really like it as an effect. I think it's really cool and it's interesting. And like, my mind immediately went to out foul spot, blood on the hands,
Oh, cool.
Lady M kind of thing. And so it was something that I really enjoyed, and I was just curious if that was kind of what you were going for, or yeah.
Love that.
One thing to be aware of as you're going through and you're continuing to rewrite and all of that, it's something that in grad school we call WXPO,
Okay.
which is you have a little bit of a trope of a newscaster or a TV reporter or a radio being like, here is information.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do, like, I think you get away with it when you're talking about the specific protest.
Yeah.
But like later on when you're talking about like, oh, he's released from jail and like stuff like that, it's like, oh, this feels a little on the nose.
In terms of like, I thought it was helpful in terms of like trying to set up the parallel between what's actually happening in terms of the protest on the island and like interweaving it with the plot.
In that regard, like I get where you're going with it, and I think that can work. Right now, it just feels a little heavy-handed.
Okay.
That it feels like you're kind of using that news reporter to be able to get that exposition out. And so I would look at one of a really like the example that I always like to go to when I'm talking about like how to get that kind of thing across is, I don't know if you ever watched The Newsroom, Sorkin's HBO show.
No, I haven't.
Okay. There's a scene where one of the reporters is on the trail for the Romney campaign. And he is really frustrated about the fact that like the Romney campaign is only giving the same soundbite to everybody. There's no like personal interaction or nothing like that. And so what they do is that it's a pan across like these 8 reporters for different networks, and all of them are saying the exact same thing. We just sort of see them saying it at different points during the conversation. So it's like, okay, we get a sense of where this is on the campaign, because he says something of like, having secured the Republican nomination, Mitt Romney was back in New Hampshire today, blah, 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 blah. But that undercurrent of everybody saying the same thing like that, and it being multiple people and kind of an interesting shot and way to think about it really helps to sort of liven it up a little bit. And you do some of the good stuff of like, that the first scene in the bar when it's the back and forth about the Yankees.
Yeah.
And like that sort of thing works well. But as it goes along, it's just kind of a trope that it feels like you're relying on a little too heavily.
Okay.
So just kind of be aware of it, think about it, and use it when needed, but don't try to overuse it.
Yeah. I guess I was kind of concerned that we would forget about it. So I was actually looking for places to add it in. And so I didn't want it to be this surprise. I definitely really liked the placement of it for like when they're getting arrested and everything, and you kind of have the news report over them all getting arrested and like what they were arrested for. And that's kind of what they're also getting arrested for.
That one works.
Yeah.
That intermixing works. The ones that I'm more relating to are the ones sort of in the middle.
Yeah. Okay.
Like where I think there's the one scene where they're talking about like, these people were rounded up like in this, and it just feels like I think it feels like a rule of 5 rather than a rule of 3 almost. You know what I mean?
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
So one thing, just to kind of keep in mind of, I know we talked to sort of everybody about, and I know Rick, you and I talked about it a decent amount last time, about scene length and getting in early or getting in late and getting out early. And there's still a couple of scenes that I feel like you kind of let it, we see people enter the scene, and I'm not sure if that's necessary. If we could just kind of drop in media res, like in the middle of conversation. One of the points that I specifically kind of bumped on was, it's on page 18. You have, Lydia it's sort of like, well, I'll see myself out or something like that. And I think her final line that I'm like, you can end it right there is, I think it's Lydia, says, I can fend for myself.
Mm,
And it's
okay.
like, that's the cap to the scene.
Yeah.
I don't need to see her leave the room. I just have that and bam.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So really just kind of like, once again, when you're going through and looking at all this stuff, look at those moments that it's like, okay, have I gotten the information I need to get out in this scene? Can I delete everything after that? After that final coda? I wanted to go into a little bit more sort of just chatting with you about Lydia and her kids.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they're going to come into a bigger play later in the series. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Are they going to be caught in the middle between Grandpa? Can you just kind of walk me through just very briefly what you see laid out?
Yeah, kind of more the opposite actually, where there will be a little bit of they're caught between Grandpa, but they're going to get caught between, if Lydia's dating Tommy, that's a new father figure in their life.
Okay.
And there's a sort of control of like machismo, like trying to figure out what manhood is for the two sons that she has, and especially for the daughter who's sort of trying to figure out her place in amongst all of this. And so there's this clashing of like, do we need this new man in our life? We don't like him. He's getting all the attention. And there's also going to be some exploration with one of the daughters who's more interested in like what's happening in Puerto Rico and what's happening on the island, and we don't really care about our family. And so, but Lydia is now being swept into this moment of, I need to only focus on what's happening here in Jersey. This is where we live now. Like, this is what we do.
Okay.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot more involved. There'll also, I want to do a storyline. This is kind of based like on my family, where one of the characters is gay, and there's a struggle within the family with that, like the whole family, and in terms of like being proud of who you are versus like being ashamed of who you are, and like, do we have to cover the secret, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love to see just maybe like a hair specifically of the daughter being really interested in what's happening in Puerto Rico versus what's happening in Jersey.
Yeah.
I would love to see a sliver of that in the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reason I ask it is because reading it, I sort of am like, okay, I'm assuming they're going to come into play later, but right now they just feel like a setup. And, the sort of like heartstring pull of, Grandpa's home, which is a really nice moment to have. So I would just say, like, see if you can kind of pepper that in very, very lightly. It doesn't need to be a whole lot.
Yeah.
My roommate and I know we kind of talked a lot about The Sopranos last time. I'm rewatching it. My roommate's watching it for the first time. And like thinking about that pilot, there's so much that sort of gets layered in there that you just get a little hint of it, of like what's going to come later. Whether it's, Meadow, who never really has an A plot line through this series, I would argue, but like certainly is a major player in it. And in the pilot, you have the scene where like she tries to sneak out of the house to go like be with the guy or whatever. Like that's just a peppering of that sort of rebellious teenager thing that we're going to get through the first 3 seasons. Things like that it's just a little drop in the bucket, but it lets us know this is what's coming.
I'm happy to hear you say I've had this issue in the past where, I've written versions and versions and versions of this where everyone complained and said there were too many kids, get rid of the kids. So I just completely got rid of the kids, and now there's only this one scene. But I think just having maybe one scene that's more focused.
And especially knowing where they're going to come in with the relationship with Tommy.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a way to sort of set up a thing and set up a little bit of conflict with Lydia of maybe Tommy's like, hey, come over, and she's with the kids and says, I can't, and they're trying to figure out what she's saying. That little sort of overheard conversation, that sort of thing can just start to set the wheels in motion of this is what to expect.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Clarification on So one thing that I sort of bumped on a little bit in this, reading it, is, and maybe you can just kind of help me walk through it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand, other than the adjacency to the underground ring, why there is such pushback for Lydia working at the bar.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I sort of drew was that it's like, well, she kind of got mixed up in this before and she doesn't want to be close to it. But if she's able to run upstairs and be away from it, the rest of it, I'm sort of like, huh.
Yeah. So in terms of backstory, Mario never wanted Lydia to be working. He raised her in this, and then he realized, I don't want her to ever be involved. She can't be around the bar. At some point she was told she can never come there. While he was away, she fell into this thing, and so her Uncle Angel had to pay off her tab, and as a way of paying her back, she now has to work for Uncle Angel at his bar.
Okay.
So when Mario returns, and this might be a fault of, I had this scene originally, I think, where Mario's really upset that Lydia's working at the bar, but that's kind of like the twist there, is that Mario he does not want her at the bar, and so Angel kind of did this against his wishes. So that I don't know if that helps clear things up.
Yeah, it does. And then I'm assuming the scene that you cut then was like a type of pre-confrontation confrontation between Mario and Angel.
Right. Yeah. Or
I would try to put that back in, because that's an interesting dynamic to me.
Yeah.
If, he's not mad at his daughter, he's mad at his brother. And I think that better sets up the understandable anger when he does retaliate against him. Because I read this and I'm like, well, is blood thicker than water? Like, I'm trying to figure that out,
right.
As it goes along. And I'm like, I get why he ends up pushing him down the stairs, but like, it still feels a little bit like, well, this needs to happen to set up what's next. And I think if you have that scene where he's really able to pinpoint like the anger of Lydia working at the bar and blame Angel for it, not act on it, just sort of confront him, then when he gets the order to, deal with Angel, then it's like, all right, he's ready to go now. He doesn't need another excuse. I get it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, how early do you think that has to happen? I mean, I guess the way that you were just describing it, I could see it happening in that first scene. Not in that first scene because he doesn't know yet, but I guess that scene where he's talking about the bell, and right before he pushes him down the stairs. But I don't know. I don't know. I can play with it. Yeah.
Maybe there's a scene, directly after he's at Lydia's with the kids. Listen, you're making a semi-mob story. I forget where exactly it falls, but I think it's kind of interesting if you do a dichotomy scene with like Angel and Mario while Lydia's at church.
Yeah, I do want to do something intercut with the church thing.
I think what you can do in that moment, if you want to do that, is you have that confrontation there, and you see Mario holding himself back and not being violent at him, and then getting the marching order, he's like, screw it. I don't need an excuse now. I'm doing this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Love it.
And you frankly, in so doing, you kind of mess with mob tropes of, obviously, there's the Bastards and The Godfather. And this is just when I was younger, listen, I'm a straight white male from the Midwest. Of course I loved mob movies. But, there's the very famous trope in The Godfather that's kind of parroted in The Sopranos and in Goodfellas of the oranges. Anytime there's an orange, something bad's going to happen.
Oh, right.
I wonder if there is a way to sort of Puerto Ricanize that. And
there
just
might be.
Mess with it. I don't know Puerto Rican culture that well. I don't know if there's like a native fruit or a native dish or something like that can be sort of held, like maybe it's empanadas, I don't know, something that it's like, that's just your little twist on it, that some person that's reading it that's a big mafia movie fan will be like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, just those little things.
Yeah, like a bad omen sort of thing that can set up the forewarning.
Yeah, I mean, Christ, maybe it's a plate of strawberries. I don't know. Just something that's like a little bit of a tip of the hat of like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. It's
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. I can find something.
yeah. That's simplification on that. Oh, on the scene with when Mario's at the house or at the apartment and like the kids are there and all of that. Like when, you know, she's like, there, I think it's,
Yes.
he comes in and her brother's like, daddy's home, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I kind of like it a little bit more, and I don't know the exact ages on the kids
Mm-hmm.
in the timeline, but I think it's a way sweeter and more innocent thing to have happen if the kids run up to her and go, grandpa's home, or granddad's home. It just tugs at the heartstrings a little bit more.
Okay.
And it's, you know, it's flagrantly manipulative of the audience, I'll admit it.
Yeah.
But I think having it come from a child, it sets up an interesting dichotomy between the tension that's here, what we have seen him do in a bar and beat the hell out of these people, to this young child's unadulterated, innocent mirth that their grandfather's home.
I see that. Yeah. I think I had originally done that because I'm setting up Junior to be, you know, daddy's boy.
Right.
He's the one because then later in that scene with Lydia when he's talking back to her, but that can actually be stronger. And I'm actually thinking as we're talking of peppering away to set up even more of the children's dichotomy and just like how they react, what their relationships are there too. So can put a tool in there.
I certainly think that like as it goes along, and I don't obviously know where Junior comes in, but I think giving the kids a little bit more feels like it is farther along the right track than giving Junior a little bit more in the pilot. As long as we know Junior's there and he's trying to follow in his father's footsteps and we get the talk back with Lydia.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. I think I know where this is going to go. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But with 3 kids, you just got to give them a little bit more screen time to let them develop and grow because kids are such a pain in the ass to write anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. I just also am just keeping it in my head that I want to make it. I think I had Junior say it because I didn't want anyone to think that Junior was her husband. But I can find a way to throw a line in there that clarifies that.
Yeah, I mean, like you can just have something very simple as like Mario be like, "Well, your brother's here to help out too."
Yeah, exactly.
As long as, and I get that intent because the first time I read it, I had to go back and double track it and be like, but yeah, as long as you just make sure you get that clarifying line out there that clearly establishes this is her brother, not her husband.
Yeah. There's so much that can happen in that scene too. I can knock out a lot of burden. Yeah.
I certainly think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
That's what I got for it.
Wow. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Fire away.
I was really struggling with this rewrite in terms of I felt so good about the opening and I was like, I feel like, you know, my first act is much more solid. And I was struggling with, I feel like it's not long enough. And I also am not sure if the plot is right as I was getting towards the end, but I was also like, maybe it's too concise, but it's hard to find the to add thickness. I mean, I feel like with these notes now, I actually have some spots where I can add length and such, but I guess I was curious about like the ending, if it felt right, like if it worked. I don't know.
The ending, yeah. I mean, I think it sounded like your worry was coming from a place of like plot thinness.
Yeah.
That didn't ring true to me. I thought
great.
that the plot did carry through very well. I thought where some of the thinness came was in some of the characters of like we kind of talked about, that I wanted to see that tip of the hat of this is where this will go.
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean,
sense.
you did what you need to do in a pilot. You set up the world, you set up the constructs, and you put this boom at the end of it that throws everything out of whack.
Great.
That, you know, makes me want to tune in for episode 2.
Right. Yes. All right. Thank you for these notes. I think it's definitely going to make it stronger and give me those extra pages I need.
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, it's with an hour pilot, as long as you're between, I would say 55 and 65, you're golden.
Great. Okay, good. Okay. Awesome.
don't be Sorkin and turn into a 90-page pilot and be like, well,
No.
they talk fast. It's 60 minutes.
No. Awesome. Thank you.
You are more than welcome. All right. Next on the docket, I have Rosemary.
All right.
How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So once again, we're finding a common theme. Awesome opening.
Yay.
This works really, really well. Literally, I could see just a hair more of it.
Okay.
Literally, like maybe a half page more of like, just to kind of set the scene. One of the things I was thinking of was, I remember, granted I was 10 when 9/11 happened, but I remember, going through airports before that and like being able to walk up to the terminal almost.
Yeah.
And so like, I wonder, just as like a really interesting way to set the scene, that open, like you're literally quarter page opening is her walking through an airport, getting up to the terminal, no TSA, not going through the crazy security, just to kind of get us there. And then once we get onto the plane and the reaction and all of that, you're like, oh my God, this is insane. It works so well to have that fear in the moment. I'm right, like in that moment of like, this just happened. If anybody tries to come in here, do not let them. Boom, 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 boom. I'm like, okay, I'm along for the ride. Let's go.
Okay, great. So you think just start that day half a page sooner of them coming. I know what I can do. Like the craziest thing that used to happen before 9/11 occurred was the Mormon families gathered at the gates waiting for their kids to come back from their mission.
Right.
And there'd be like generations of people with balloons and posters.
Yeah. So like have that moment and like we see the flight crew walking through the airport sans TSA checkpoint and we're like, oh, okay, I know this is pre 9/11, gets
Right.
on the plane, oh shit. And I think what's really interesting is you're going to have people that are like, well, I feel like that's, tipping the hand that this is what you're going to be doing. But the truth of the matter is you see that setup and you see a flight attendant get on a plane and my mind is going to go to, shit, she's on United 91 or she's on one of the planes that's going to go in. I haven't seen what it was like for Joe Schmo flight attendant who was just in the air.
Right.
When they got the news. And so that twist of that narrative, I'm there.
Okay,
I'm
great.
really, really there. Yeah, it was really great. And I loved jumping ahead a little bit, the moment when she first gets back on the plane and the pilot is like matter-of-factly being like, no, all right, you have this in here, break a coffee pot over their head or one of the bottles, like this is how you stop them.
Right.
Be warned, they decapitated the one flight attendant and like held her head. I was like, Jesus. But that kind of thing, it
Right.
sets the score and it feels very natural to have those conversations at the moment. So
Yeah, I support myself as a flight attendant. So this is all based on my experience.
yeah, it's great. Thus far it's my second favorite like flight attendant scene outside of I'm a sucker for Aaron Sorkin, and there's the scene in the newsroom when like the pilot gets pissed off and comes out of the cockpit the night they kill Bin Laden, and the guy's like about to rail at the pilot, and then he looks at the badge and goes, we killed Osama bin Laden tonight, and I wanted to be the first to tell you. And I'm like, oh, yay! But anyway, so that's really good. I love the student in the classroom shitting on America.
Oh yeah,
Perfect.
that's true too.
I don't doubt it. I do not doubt it. I knew people at the time who were like that. I mean, and later and so on and so forth is all of that. The one thing I would say about that scene is I'm not wild about Kimberly responding.
Okay.
I kind of like the idea, and it's something that I think is a note for a lot of it, that Kimberly does have a tendency to sort of share her emotions openly.
Uh-huh.
And I think specifically dealing with a script like this where I forget it's not PTSD, it's like acute stress
Yeah.
disorder,
Yeah.
something along those lines. I find it harder to believe that she would be that open about what she is feeling if she is experiencing this.
Okay.
That I kind of like it a little bit more if she bottles it up. That feels a lot more natural to me. Or if in that moment you want to have her respond to that student, I think a direct response seems counterintuitive. It seems counter to what we're talking about. But like an indirect response where she just like loses it at somebody else, or, you know, snaps at the professor, or does some sort of obfuscation about emotions where she's not directly addressing what's going on, but she's venting. That feels like a natural response for someone who is going through this.
Okay.
I love the introduction of St. Exbury now. Of
Okay.
like, you see him in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll just sort of roll all of my St. Exbury notes into one here. So I would love to see one more scene like that, where she just sort of randomly sees him and is like, what the shit?
Okay.
Before they start having like conversations and doing that. And then the one thing that I still bumped on, and I think you did a really good job of having him be her mentor as it goes along. You know, I get, and now, and you know, we talked about it last time, and you put it in the sort of page of like, hey, this is what I changed. I get where she needs this. I get the connection now, which is at the heart of the story. And so, you know, biggest step, nailed it.
Okay, good.
But I feel like you have these moments of magical realism, but you have too many types of it.
Okay.
So we have scenes where it's St. Exbury chilling on a park bench with her and just kind of talking her through things. We have moments where she is third person looking at something they've done. And then we have moments where, you know, she is being pulled along into St. Exbury's stories and story. And I think, frankly, it needs to be 2 out of 3 with that. And I feel like, to me, the best one to lose is the third person. I'm just watching what's going on.
Right.
I know there's this scene of like on the beach, and it like goes to sort of like vintage footage and that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that I bump on, because it feels like you set this tone and the rules of this world in terms of like, just going to show up and that's what's going to happen. And then that feels like it's a break from those rules. It's a supplemental rule to those rules. And I kind of have to rethink the world about a third of the way through the script, and it pulls me out of the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that very first scene where she first sees him now, and he's working on the plane, and he looks up and breaks the fourth wall right before the roommate interrupts.
Yeah.
You're not counting that one as a third person just watching one, are you?
No, because to me, at least, and you can clarify, the way I viewed it is that like the plane was kind of in the room.
Yes.
You know, like he was in the room with the plane, and he was very much, I'm gonna get punny here, and excuse me, he was on her plane, her astral plane, working on the plane. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like she was transported into a different dimension where she's like witnessing all of this.
Right. Okay. So the ones where she's really witnessing are when she's at the beach and she reads and it goes to black and white.
Yeah. That's
like,
it just didn't work for me.
Okay.
It was too much, I think.
Okay.
And, you know, to me, what that was is it was too much of a, I'm seeing into her mind's eye, and this is what she is seeing happening, as opposed to everything else we really have with him is sort of fantastical.
Yes, she's interacting with him in there. So,
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And so having those two together just kind of, it didn't mesh with me.
Okay.
Too transparent. So I figured out, and I was reading your notes and everything, with the hoarder scene.
Yeah.
I like, and seeing what you said about it in terms of like, this is a really good way to get a lot of her character out. And I agree with that. And I realized what I bumped on with it, because it was underneath everything. It was that you had this first scene where it was like the person in the house, all the blinds were closed, and it was just this sort of like weird roommate exchange thing.
Mhm.
And then she goes to the hoarder. And the way that is set up to me, it feels like it's going to be a funny montage of running into different people and the weird ass rooms that she's going to try to rent. And so having a quick little one scene and then this longer scene with the hoarder and that's it throws me out of it. And so the way I think to make it work, cut that first scene, just have her look at one room, it's the hoarder room, bam.
Oh, okay. Cut which first scene? The scene with her roommate?
No, isn't there a scene where she like goes in and it's like the one person that she's like trying to do, it's like with all the blackout curtains and they like won't let her see her room. Like she looks for another room right before she goes to the hoarder's house.
No, she just goes, that's still the hoarder's house.
Is it still the hoarder's house? Am I insane?
Yeah, she just goes to the hoarder's house.
Okay.
That's the only room that's the only room that she looks at, because when she leaves, she realizes she doesn't have any money, so she can't move. And then there is a montage scene of like looking at weird, but that's later.
Right. Okay, I'm insane. And ignore what I said. I apologize for that. I read that differently, and I guess my brain is
I'll look at it and make sure
it's
like more clear that it's always the hoarder, but yeah.
Yeah. So I don't mind the VO that you have on her at a couple of points. The one thing with it is I would love for you to clarify it, because it took me about halfway through the VO for me to go, oh, no, she's getting an MFA in creative writing. That is her writing.
Right.
Cheesy as hell, have her writing on a notepad or, you know, getting up in class to share or something like that, so we know that that's her writing. Hit us over the head a little bit with that.
Okay.
Or, you know, set it up earlier that like we see it or whatever it is. Yeah. I don't remember if I told you this last time. The Meisner, the ball and the back and forth. I was in college, I was Meisner trained. And so I was just like, God damn it. I was just laughing at it. And being like, oh, are they going to do the knock next? Like, what's the next part in this? Was the surprise you throwing in the gambler? Was that?
Yes.
Okay. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Okay, good. I'm like, this is going to be so surprising. Okay.
It came out of left field, but it does so much. Because to me, what it actually did was it solidified that this is her imagination. That she's not like crossing dimensional planes and that he's not this spectral figure, you know, that's there. To me, I read that as I was like, oh, okay, this is her active imagination working it out. And it's silly, it's funny, it makes me laugh. And I think one of the ways to maybe throw that in there is to like have her have that song be a thing in her life before he sings it.
Okay.
So it just kind of runs that undercurrent, and it's a really nice way to sort of have that conversation, to lay that out, that it's, yo, this is not spectral, it's not the ghost of St. Exbury. That is your little tip to the audience of going, that's what this is. This is her imagination with this.
Okay.
Your stuff in the nightmares works really well. Again, I love you. Nightmares are very, very hard to write. They are, because there's that fine line between like, when do I tip the hand that this is a nightmare, so on and so forth. And they play very, very well in this script. And so I want to commend you for that. Yeah, St. Exbury, I would love for him to just kind of, be doing something in her everyday life once more before they start talking to each other. It's just that rule of three. Boom, boom, boom. Meisner's good. 9/11 was great. Yeah, and I think, so the biggest thing is, we're seeing her come to grips with her emotions, coming to grips with this trauma that she has suffered and all of that. And she's using St. Exbury to do that. And kind of like I mentioned very briefly before, one of the ways I think we need to really see that embody is the way she talks. At the beginning, I would love for her to be reticent about voicing what's on her mind, not being confrontive, confronted, whatever the hell that word is, not being willing to enter into conflict. There we go. Not wanting that, biting her tongue, lashing out indirectly, things like that, so that at the end, when you have these moments like when the student mouths off and is like, we deserved it. Are you kidding me? We meddled in the Middle East for so long. She can be like, oh, really? All these people deserve to die? These flight attendants who just got on a plane because it's their job and that's how they made a paycheck, they deserve to die because something their government did without their knowledge? You're okay with that? Like, that biting needs to grow from somewhere.
Okay.
And I think the easiest and the most natural way to have that happen is, that holding back of emotion, even with the therapist or the counselor. I forget what the exact term that you use in the script is. She's a people pleaser. That's kind of her job. So she's going to say the things that the therapist wants to hear because she knows the therapist wants to hear them, but it's actually not helping her at all.
Right.
And so that growth of being honest with herself, both in what she says, what she does, and how she processes, that kind of threefold growth is the arc, is the journey we want to see her go through.
Okay. Yeah.
That is all the chicken scratch I have for you. Do you have any questions? Can I clarify anything?
Yeah, I just have two questions. So the gambler, to like sprinkle it in earlier, does it need to be like 2 times so it's a rule of 3, or?
Yeah. I think, she has a pretty clear music choice already.
Mhm.
And some of it is obviously just to piss off her roommate, but she's got a pretty clear music choice. I think, have you seen Inside Out, the Pixar?
I think I watched the beginning of it.
Okay. There's a running joke they have about like spear of fresh gum or something, that
Uh-huh.
it's like an earworm that gets stuck in your head and you can't get rid of it.
Okay.
I think that's a kind of thing you can explore. That this is not her kind of music. Maybe she hears it,
Mhm.
and then later it gets stuck in her head, and she's pissed that it's stuck in her head.
Mhm.
And then St. Exbury is, singing it. So it's that kind of, here is it's volleyball.
Right.
Here's the pop up. Here's the set. There's the spike. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
We have it in the outside world. She starts to embody it, and then bam, her subconscious runs with it.
Okay, cool. And then what about at the very end, I added that you can see St. Exupery's plane flying past the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
Is that her in the third sort of looking out, or leave it? That's okay.
No, because to me, once again, he is in her world.
Okay.
The third person looking in,
Oh, okay.
it's it's when you have that vintage moment of like everything is his world.
Right.
As long as he is a part of today,
Right.
September, October, November of 2001,
Yeah.
that works. And to me, that makes me smile. It's a cute image. It's just like,
Yeah. Okay. So then that would mean, though, that I should change or cut the scene where she's reading about him and she sees that he's circling around the airport in 1928, even though that's a cute scene.
it's a cute scene. And I think the way you can, if you want to bring that in, if you want to still have that, change the location. She's reading it at an airport, ready to get on a plane, and she sees him circling that airport.
Okay, yeah. I could do something like that, yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. I am glad to be helpful.
Yeah.
All right. That is. And on to Alan. How are you, my friend?
Hi, good morning. Good Sunday morning. Hi.
Good morning. Good morning. I hope you're doing well. And, you have obviously far less COVID cases than we do, so kudos.
And they just announced the government $1 billion investment in this film studios here.
Fantastic.
So Taiwan is they got this love-hate relationship with Korea, but the Koreans gave them the model and just said spend a lot more money.
Yeah. Sometimes it works. All right. So, I loved getting to the town earlier. Worked really well. But I still think we can kind of trim it down a little bit in that beginning, because to me, there on like page 29, you have the moment where he's like, I just need one person to trust me, or something along those lines. I'm reading my chicken scratch and trying to remember. That's the point of attack. That is the tangible goal that he now has to do. It's, Paul and everything, we get this sort of big goal of like, you need to convince them to sell. And weirdly, what I kind of looked at this as is Music Man. Beginning of it, Harold Hill needs to sell his instruments. Okay, great. That's a big, overarching, wide-ranging goal. Where does that first beat in the real central conflict come out? Oh, did you just put in a billiard parlor? Yeah. Bam. Okay, now I know how to do this. I'm going to convince the town that billiards is terrible, and the only way to restore moral authority in this town is by having them have a marching band, and I have all these instruments to sell it. That's a really weird analogy, but it made sense in my head. So that kind of thing of like, I would look at trying to compress down between page 1 and 29 so that you have those moments of him sort of, okay, what is this town? Getting up to speed with it. I think you can have a little less time with the driver. You know, we can literally just basically come in. He's on the way into town. He's on the phone with Paul. We get an idea of who Paul is. Driver drops him off in town and is like, yo, I'll see you when you're done. He's on his own. He's got to figure things out. Over the course of 7 pages, we get this whirlwind introduction to this bizarro town. And then on page 12, 13, 14, somewhere quick in that, we have this town meeting. And he goes, okay, I know how to do this. We're off to the races. That to me really, I think, pushes it forward. And I like Paul presenting more obstacles as the script goes along. You know, him kind of the check-ins. It works, but I also think there needs to be other ways than just the telephone call. It feels like a repetition of the same obstacle over and over and over again, as opposed to new obstacle, new obstacle, new obstacle, new obstacle, if that makes sense. Same with philosophy. And I like the idea of, you know, you kind of have this lovely thing that a lot of the townspeople are just very open, kind of in reverse of what I was talking about with Rosemary, with Kimberly, where like, you know, you want to hold her emotions in. I love that they're all just like, no, this is how I am. Like, it really, really works. And so that works really well for me. I think cutting out the characters, I get a better sense of the town itself now. My other question to you, that this is just kind of a thing I wanted to discuss. How slimy is he? Like, how much of a sleazeball do you think he is?
Chuck?
Yeah.
Not at all.
Okay.
That's why earlier I had trouble when people said he needs to come in and lie, and I kept thinking that's not what he would do. And so I tried to do the reverse psychology from, you've never seen the movie Local Hero, 1986?
I have not, no.
Okay. So he's a Texas guy that's sent to the Scottish town to buy their town, and he's out of his league. He's not a negotiator either. But he comes to this quirky town and they want to sell. So it's that's what I was trying to do, was that opposite, and it didn't work. So I needed to go back to how I had it. But I never had Chuck as being anything other than he needed to grow to become that he needed to become a new man, he needed to become an honest man. If I had that, I could see that change from liar to savior.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't have felt authentic to me of how I could. I met a lot of supermarket executives here in Taiwan that sponsored my radio show, and I could picture them in my head in a way. You know, that they had a goal. They wanted to get that bonus. They wanted to. They wanted to succeed, but I don't think they ever really did it by lying, you know, to their customers.
Okay.
And if I have can, but I'd go to somebody else and say, help me kind of outline this, because I've got this mental block of making him a liar.
Okay, that's fair. And I think then one of the ways to sort of approach it is, to me, yes, he does grow. And I love that it is he grows as a result of the women in his life. Because I have found that is the best way for you to grow as a human being, is to have wonderful women around you that are like, hey, stop being an idiot. Very much my girlfriend does on a daily basis. But so I wonder then if you can explore a little bit more of inadvertent sliminess. I
didn't hear that.
Inadvertent sliminess.
Oh, okay.
He strikes me a little bit as suburban, maybe a little urban, corporate-y guy, obviously that kind of thing, who doesn't really know what it's like to be on the ground in these places. I think that's a fair assessment of him. And, I think really playing into like that he believes that he is doing the right thing when he comes in. Because my thing is that he does it and then it's almost, I don't have enough of a personal conflict when he's like, oh my God, and what am I doing is bad? You know what I mean? It's a little bit too much of like, oh, wait, now I'm going to switch and do this now. I want to have that ultimate 80s cliche moment of him walking in the rain being like, what am I going to do? That kind of thing. And I think one of the ways to really explore that is to not make him, because you don't want to make him slimy, make him more urban. Make him more slicker. Make him more city slicker. That's the word I'm looking for. Really play into that. I think it's interesting if you mess with, technology. Does he get cell service out there? What's the Wi-Fi like? And he doesn't have it, and he has to sort of adjust to what life is like doing that. Weirdly, in saying that, I go to Witness, the Harrison Ford, Kelly McGillis movie, of that sort of transition. And I think that can really, being removed from everything from the city, if you really look at that city versus nature, that can help bring up more of that character change we need to see.
I guess he stumbles upon that with Hooties,
Mm-hmm.
by helping her, get that website more exposure. She wins.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of helps her in her class, and that might give him the idea of how.
Yeah.
Because I like that restriction that I put in, that Value Buy doesn't want any media publicity.
Right.
And so that took away why Value Buy wouldn't run ads against them.
Mm-hmm.
But Value Buy could run positive ads, I suppose.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a massive political junkie. I'm the guy who sits there and looks at the full crosstabs on polling data and is like, well, there's a 3% margin of error. And I don't gamble on sports. I gamble on elections. I'm weird like that. True story. But if you look at that kind of stuff, there's weird ways to do positive ads in placement that actually work as a negative ad. You know what I mean? Like, there's weird ways to do that, and that's kind of a fun rabbit hole to dive down. It's almost like a sarcasm sometimes. But yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. I think that's frankly a really great way to keep the pressure on Chuck the entire time, is if you have Value Buy putting in advertisements. There's not a store around, but they're advertising for themselves, and it's like, oh God, they're coming. I know they're coming. And that's one of those ways that instead of having the check-ins from Paul, which can feel repetitive, you have this sort of you know, undergirding push. Yeah.
Yeah, at Value Buy, we ask customers, what do you need? And you get the redneck, you know, like,
Exactly.
I need more tires. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can like, I think you can even do like a cutback at some point that you have that ad come on the television and he's sitting there watching it and he can call back in, check in with Paul or however you want to do it. And Paul can be like, yeah, we specifically targeted those actors to that area because we thought that they would fit in with it. And he's like, do you not realize how offensive this is? You know, it's one of those things that he realizes after being down there a while, what that big city stereotype of a small town, how demeaning that is. You
We
know,
need to create an opposite slogan to "Small Towns Matter" at the beginning, so for the company to evolve into, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Growth equals cheaper prices for everyone, or something. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, listen, I think I told you last time, I can relate to this. We had in my hometown of Zionsville, Indiana, the little dinker that it is, we had a Walmart attempt to come in, and all of the local mom and pop businesses were like, nope. And we didn't get them. They didn't come. We put up too much of a fight. But those were my big kind of broad sweeping notes for you. Do you have anything that you were worried about? Anything you want to ask me?
The couple that Paul sent there, the African American couple that were supposed to go in, was it clear to you that they were going to go in and poison the plants? I mean, I didn't go through all of that because I thought that would have been boring, because you said, oh, I get it why they're there. Just get
Yeah, no, I understood it.
Okay.
It's one of the things I really enjoy when people write well, which is like, we get what they're doing.
And the sheriff locked up the bulldoze driver to protect his job. To
Mhm.
kind of, I doing that more to reveal character, to say, oh, this is a really good guy. You know,
Yeah, I think,
fire did this to protect him.
you do a really interesting thing with the sheriff that, like, it's I don't want to say it's a trope, but like, he is that like amazingly good sheriff that, at least for me, that like I wish we had in my home small town, instead of the sheriff who was just like, you're a kid, I hate you. But one that's like the good guy who actually believes in the rule of law. And it's a very good archetype, and you write it very well.
I watched a lot of Andy Griffith shows to try to get that, because I just said, he was an icon. So if somebody would say, reviewing it would say, this is the Andy Griffith Show 50 years later, but with a proud Native American sheriff, but
Yeah.
but he's thinking of what's a win-win instead of how to enforce the law.
Right.
Because I had an earlier, when he caught a speeder, what he sentenced him to was an hour of weeding in the greenhouse.
Yeah.
And so the people would go in that greenhouse, and Michael would affect them. I guess my last question, I tried to, in between those drafts, I tried to up that magical realism. Does it seem a little bit more that those strawberries are magical?
Yes, it does. It very much, I mean, we weren't in like full on, big fish territory necessarily, but it's definitely, I get the sense that it's like, okay, there's a little bit of the mystic, there's a little bit of the magical. It's not overbearing. It's not to the point where we're having Saint Exupery appear before somebody and, that kind of thing. But it is very much just sort of one of those things of like, okay, this is a special little town. I like this,
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking, that Chuck describes himself as a man of science, a man of numbers, and therefore that type person wouldn't have any room in his life for magic or faith or those things. And so I saw that transformation. But listening to you say it, and then I know when I listen to this recording about City Slickers, I know I can add another layer in. But that's what I was looking more, is his transformation is because he got sent there because he was a non-believer. I try to say everything that Paul has said to him has a purpose, right? Wasabi ice cream. That proves that you're not a man of faith. He goes, so I want you to go there and get washed over. So I think I could take that layer that I wanted to do and combine that with drinking a Coke out of a straw, always another quirk or two, and blend that in there. So yeah, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, man. Thank you. All righty, and moving on to the last of the day. Kath, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. So yeah, obviously you and I were emailing a lot about this back and forth. Not a whole lot of rewrites to necessarily go over, just a couple of pages here, but I really liked what you did with the dad.
Mm-hmm.
That being a tie-in. And I would love to see, because I think it's just like, because I literally went back and searched it to try to find it, because I was like, trying to remember. I think there's like a brief conversation that they have like on a page.
Mm-hmm.
That they talk very briefly about Ross's dad, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to see not more conversation, but allusions to it.
Okay.
Like somehow we can like visually see that void in his life, or we know that, the relationship with his dad is a big problem, so on and so forth. And I think by the time we get into the third act and we get into, as you said, the meat of what you actually want to talk about in this,
Mm-hmm.
having the father connection as she's going to Travis for her brother, that really heightens everything, and it ties them in together.
Okay.
Thanks for that. We didn't hear any. Oh, and I love that it's chicken scratch. If you can read it better than I can, I don't even know. I loved it was, and I know you and I kind of talked about theater and that sort of thing a little bit this week as well. Perfect of just like, hey dad, end of conversation, never mentioning. I'm like, this is brilliant. That's all I need to know. I loved that.
Okay.
Absolutely loved it.
Cool.
That relationship, that dynamic with Ross, I think whether it's his dad walked out on him and then his dad tried to come back and rebuild that relationship, that kind of mirrors exactly what's going on with him and Grace. And so like that sort of thing, you just get into the parallels and you get into all of that. On these rewrites, just kind of looking over, I would still watch a couple of your some of your action descriptions. It's a little.
This is just like raw. I know it's really, really raw. So I'm not surprised. Yeah.
You're all good. I say these as just things to kind of keep an eye for.
Sure, of course.
You've got a line like on 83, the girl is glad the man is dead.
Gosh, okay.
And then like I think another one you have like Ross, he starts to feel euphoric or something like that. Just always
Okay.
dealing with that actable outward crap. Actors get pissy if you tell them like what their emotions are supposed to be because it's their one job. But no, I mean to sort of reiterate what you and I were talking about this week. If the story you want to tell in this is Act 3, if it is the reunion story, and that part of it, and I need everybody else to cover their ears because as a writer, you should never ever do what I'm about to say. Lower the stakes in Act 2. You have to make it less of a conflict with Diane and the man because Grace getting absconded brought into essentially a sex trafficking ring, all of that, it pulls us out of the main story enough that we lose it. Keep it because I was kind of ruminating about this before we jumped on. I think the way to keep that similar is if it's frankly more fucked up. If it is like she's brought into a family, that's the way they actually view it. And it's less of an emphasis on the sex trafficking and more of an emphasis on this messed up family dynamic. If she's searching for family, if that's one of her big overall needs, and she's brought into this, it's sort of like a halfway there, but it's not there.
I've tried that out, but it messes with her objective to get to her brother. Like if she thinks he's in danger without her, why would she stick around for a second longer than she has to?
Right. And so I think she can still be trying to get out, but maybe making the best of what she has potentially. Or, if that desire to leave is still there, but she's getting pangs of like, I don't know if this term is politically correct anymore. I apologize. Stockholm syndrome. I don't know if that has been disproved through the years or anything like that. Those kind of things, those weird definitions of family, whether it's, Patty Hearst type situation or whatever, that's a thing to play with. As long as you have the internal conflict of she still does want to get to the brother, but there are things that are starting to draw her into that world.
Okay.
That's a way to play with it. But the outright, she is kidnapped, she is brought into a sex trafficking ring, and she cannot do anything to escape. That is just too massive and frankly emotionally significant of a plot that it makes me forget about everything else.
Okay.
Sort of, I was thinking about it, and in a lot of ways it's similar to Room, the Brie Larson. But the only reason why that movie worked was because that part of it that was, that movie is not about someone who gives birth in captivity. That movie is about that child learning about the world.
Wow.
But the only reason we get that is because that is the opening part of that movie, and then we move on. And so, having sex trafficking and that part of it be that big, that late, is what pulls us back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that is helpful. I know you and I were going back and forth, and I'm sorry if my words frustrated you at all.
No, I think they were not frustrating, and trying to deal with people's feedback as part of the process. So, I am still trying to shoehorn Act 3 onto Act 2. Yeah. So part of what I was discovering, because even though it only looks like 5 pages, I was like rewriting it every night, those 5 pages, and
Okay.
couldn't get any further than those. But making Ross himself the kind of obstacle in Act 3, making him increasingly kind of unstable and dangerous, is where I'm going to kind of head with it now,
Okay.
and see if it can, see how it stacks up to the stuff in Act 2, because it would be a direct follow-on from the stuff he did in Act 2.
Yeah, very much so. And I think if he follows in his father's footsteps, that's a nice parallel to be able to draw, like I said.
Follows in his father's footsteps.
Kind of like if his father leaving or something like that I just sort of mentioned earlier on, as a potential way to run with it. Just underscoring that father-brotherly connection. Any way you can link the two of them,
Okay.
emotionally or psychologically, it gives us a more compelling story if they're sort of fighting similar things or they have similar things they're dealing with.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
You are more than welcome. All right, everybody. And with that, we now conclude our wonderful 2-week session. It has been wonderful working with you guys, really and truly. I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy. And I sincerely hope we are on the waning end of all of this shenaniganry.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for everything in these 2 weeks. And yeah, it's been nice to have something to look forward to in the midst of all of this darkness.
Could not agree more.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. It was so insightful, and I thought it was really, really great feedback for everybody.
My
Yeah.
pleasure, Rosemary. Thanks.
All right, cool.
All right,
All right,
thank you.
everybody. Stay safe.
Bye. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.